New Year's Eve is supposed to be loud in a good way. That night, the house was full, too full. Laughter spilled out of the living room, glasses clinked in the dining area. Someone had music playing just loud enough to sound festive, not loud enough to drown out conversation. From the outside, it looked like a family doing things right. Inside, I was being accused. Victor stood across from me, close enough that I could smell the alcohol on his breath, but not close enough to touch. His posture was stiff. His voice wasn't raised. That was what made it worse. He said my name slowly, the way people do when they've already decided what you are. "There's a message on your phone," he said. He didn't ask. He didn't say whose message it was or what it said. He just let the sentence hang there, heavy and unfinished, like the room would fill in the rest for him. I noticed something immediately. No one interrupted him. Not his mother, not his sister, not the guests I had cooked for, hosted, accommodated for years. 20 people in the room, and not one of them asked a clarifying question. Victor continued. "I want an explanation. Now. Not later. Not privately. Right now, in front of everyone. If you've ever been in my position, you know that tone. It's not curiosity, it's not confusion. It's authority announcing itself." I looked around the room. His mother, Eleanor, was sitting upright on the couch, hands folded neatly in her lap. Her eyes were alert, observant, not surprised. Rachel, his sister, leaned back in her chair, arms crossed loosely, watching the way people watch courtroom television. Interested, detached, almost entertained. No one asked what the message actually said. That told me everything. Victor took a step closer. "Go ahead," he said. "Explain it." I did. Once. Calmly. Briefly. I said it was work-related. I said it was a standard New Year's message sent to my entire team. I said I could show them the thread if they wanted. No one moved. Instead, Victor's expression hardened. "I don't want excuses," he said. "I want the truth." That was the moment I understood the rules of the room had changed. Truth wasn't something to be established. It was something to be extracted. Eleanor stood up. She didn't rush. She never did. She placed her feet carefully on the floor, adjusted her jacket, and spoke with the kind of certainty that doesn't invite response. "I always had a feeling," she said. "A married woman doesn't receive messages like that unless she encourages it." She didn't look at me when she said it. She didn't need to. The statement wasn't meant for me. It was meant for the room. Rachel smiled. Just slightly. Then she added, "Some women just like attention too much to know when to stop." That was how it escalated. Not through evidence, through momentum. Victor turned back to me. "You should admit what you did," he said. "It'll go easier if you're honest." Then he said it. He told me to get down on my knees and admit it properly, so the family could hear it from me directly. I didn't react right away. Not because I was frozen. Because I was observing. He reached toward the doorway and took hold of the old leather belt hanging there. It had been in that house longer than I had. It wasn't decoration. In that family, it was a symbol. A reminder of how things were handled when someone crossed a line. No one stopped him. No one told him to put it down. No one said my name. I noticed something else then. My heart wasn't racing. My hands weren't shaking. There was no panic. There was clarity. There's a specific moment when you realize an explanation won't save you, because the verdict is already in. If you've ever been there, you know exactly what I mean. It's quiet, almost peaceful. Fear stops being useful. That's where I was standing. Victor kept talking. Words about respect, about shame, about what kind of example this set. His voice blurred into background noise. I looked around the room again. Faces I recognized. People whose birthdays I remembered. Dishes I had cooked. Tables I had set. Holidays I had hosted. 20 people. Not one voice broke the silence. That silence wasn't neutral. It was participation. I didn't cry. I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't kneel. Instead, I did something small. I straightened my back. That alone shifted the energy. Victor hesitated. just for a fraction of a second. Power often does when it expects submission and gets stillness instead. I slipped my hand into the pocket of my cardigan. I felt the edge of the small flash drive I had been carrying for months. I hadn't planned to use it that night. It had never been part of any dramatic plan. It was just there, quiet, waiting. Plans change when pressure shows its face. Victor was still holding the belt, not raised, not moving, waiting for the version of me he was used to, the one who explained, the one who smoothed things over, the one who absorbed discomfort so the room could stay comfortable. I realized, with absolute certainty, that if I knelt in that moment, this would not be the last time. It would be the precedent. So I didn't move. I let the silence stretch longer than anyone liked, long enough that people shifted in their seats, long enough that a glass clinked softly against a table, ordinary sounds filling an uncomfortable gap. Then I stepped away from where I'd been standing. I walked past Victor without asking permission, close enough that he could have stopped me if he wanted to. He didn't. I headed toward the television mounted on the wall. That was when the room finally went quiet. "What are you doing?" Eleanor asked, her voice tight now. I didn't answer. I picked up the remote from the side table. My hands were steady. Not because I was brave, because I was done negotiating with people who had already made their choice. Outside, fireworks went off right on schedule. Midnight, a new year. Victor spoke again, softer this time. "Don't make this worse." I paused, just long enough to look at him. "If you were in my position," I said, "you'd understand how late that warning is." That was the first thing I'd said since the accusations started. The television screen glowed blue as it switched inputs. The light reflected off the walls, off the faces that had been so certain of themselves minutes earlier. They thought I was about to beg. They were wrong. I took a breath and looked at all of them. They thought I was about to beg. They were wrong. I had been part of that family for 5 years, long enough to know where everything belonged, long enough to know which doors squeaked, which floorboards gave sound, which topics ended conversations faster than arguments ever could. From the outside, it looked like I had married well. Victor had a stable job, the house was large, holidays were loud and full. People used words like lucky when they talked about me. I let them. It was easier than explaining the quiet math I was always doing in my head, what to say, what to ignore, what to swallow so the day could move on without friction. Eleanor ran the house without ever saying she did. She didn't need to. Her authority lived in the pauses after her sentences, in the way conversations stopped when she entered a room, in the way people adjusted their posture without realizing they were doing it. Compliments from her came with conditions. Criticism came disguised as concern. "You might want to rethink that," she'd say. "I'm only saying this because I care. In this family, we do things a certain way. Nothing overt, nothing you could point to and call cruel." That was her strength. She never raised her voice. She never needed to. The first time she corrected me in front of guests, I felt it immediately. Not embarrassment calculation. I laughed it off. I told myself it wasn't worth addressing, that it wasn't the right moment. Victor thought the same way. He had grown up adapting to her moods, anticipating rather than confronting, smoothing things over before they became problems. When Eleanor questioned my decisions, he changed the subject. When she criticized my cooking, he joked. When she corrected me publicly, he stayed quiet. Later, when I asked him why he didn't say anything, he always had a reason. "It's not worth starting something. She didn't mean it like that. This isn't the time. There was never a right time." Rachel followed her mother's lead with less restraint. Sometimes she smiled when Eleanor cut me down. Sometimes she added her own comments, subtle enough to pass as jokes. "You're brave to wear that," she'd say. I could never be that opinionated. "You're sensitive, aren't you?" I noticed. I always noticed. I just didn't respond. If you've ever been in a situation like that, you understand the trap. You tell yourself you're being mature, that you're choosing peace, that things will settle once everyone sees you're not a threat. So I worked harder. I cooked. I organized. I arrived early and stayed late. I handled the technology no one else wanted to learn. I fixed problems quietly before they became visible. I kept track of birthdays, preferences, allergies. I learned who needed what and when, without being asked. I told myself effort would eventually be recognized. It wasn't. What I didn't understand then was this: silence doesn't buy safety. It only delays the moment someone decides to use it against you. And the longer I stayed quiet, the more room that system had to grow. It wasn't just about Eleanor. It was about the structure she had built and everyone else had learned to survive inside of. Victor's neutrality wasn't passive, it was functional, it kept the system running. Rachel's comments weren't random, they reinforced hierarchy. Guests didn't interrupt because discomfort had been normalized. By the time New Year's Eve arrived, that system didn't need proof, it only needed a trigger. That trigger came in the form of a sound I barely noticed at first, a notification, short, neutral. The kind you hear a dozen times a day and forget immediately. My phone was on the edge of the table. I was in the kitchen, doing what I always did, making sure everything ran smoothly. When I walked back into the living room, Victor already had it in his hand. His expression had changed, not confusion, not curiosity, something firmer, settled. He asked me who the message was from. I told him the truth. My supervisor. A standard New Year's message sent to the entire team. No emojis, no personal comments, a line of text and a polite sign-off. I'd seen it before. So had everyone else in the department. Victor didn't ask to see the rest of the thread. He didn't ask who else received it. He didn't ask anything that would have required verification. Instead, he turned the screen toward the room. That was a choice. Eleanor stood up immediately. She didn't read the message closely. She didn't need to. She spoke with certainty, the kind that doesn't invite questions. "This is inappropriate," she said. "I always knew something like this would happen." She said a married woman doesn't receive messages like that unless she encourages it. Rachel leaned forward then, interest sharpened. "Some women don't know where to draw the line," she added. I explained once, calmly, clearly. I said it was work-related. I said it was sent to everyone. I offered to open the group chat and show them. No one moved closer to look. That's when I understood something important. The room wasn't interested in clarity. It was interested in confirmation. Victor stepped forward, his voice lowered, but his tone hardened. "You don't need to explain," he said. "You just need to admit it." Admit what, exactly, was never specified. It didn't need to be. Vagueness works well when power wants flexibility. Eleanor's gaze stayed on me, sharp and expectant. She wasn't angry. She was confident that this would end the way it always did, with me backing down, with order restored. I remember thinking how efficient the system was, how quickly it mobilized once it sensed an opening. A message became suspicion, suspicion became accusation, accusation became moral authority, all without evidence, all without resistance. Until that moment, I had believed my role was temporary, that if I stayed patient, stayed reasonable, stayed quiet, the pressure would ease, that I was earning something by enduring it. Standing there, surrounded by people who had already decided who I was, I realized how wrong that assumption had been. Silence hadn't made me safe. It had made me convenient. There's a point where awareness sharpens into something else. Not anger, not fear. Resolve. I felt it then, steady and unmistakable. This wasn't about a message. It wasn't about fidelity or trust. It was about control. About reminding me where I stood in a system that functioned best when I absorbed discomfort and called it peace. And for the first time since I had married into that family, I stopped trying to earn my place inside it. I didn't change my tone. I didn't raise my voice. I simply stopped participating in the performance they had prepared for me. That decision didn't announce itself. It didn't need to, but it was already changing the outcome. There's a specific moment when you realize explanations are no longer currency. You can feel it when it happens. The air changes. The room stops listening and starts waiting for you to comply, to fold, to confirm what they've already decided. That moment arrived quietly. I was still standing near the edge of the living room when Victor stepped closer. He didn't touch me. He didn't need to. His presence alone was meant to redirect the situation back into something familiar. Him standing, me adjusting. "You're making this harder than it needs to be," he said. That sentence wasn't about resolution. It was about obedience. I looked at him, then at the phone still in his hand. The screen had gone dark. The message itself no longer mattered. It had already done its job. "If you'd just admit it," he continued, "we could move on." Move on meant bury it. Move on meant silence. Move on meant I would carry whatever label they decided fit best so the system could reset itself and keep running. I spoke again, once, calmly. "There's nothing to admit," I said. "It's a work message. I can show you the group chat." I even took a step toward him, closing the distance slightly, offering access instead of defense. That was a mistake. Not because I was wrong, but because it signaled cooperation to people who weren't negotiating in good faith. Victor shook his head. "I don't need to see anything else." That's when it became clear. Verification was inconvenient. Eleanor intervened smoothly, her voice cutting in before the pause could stretch long enough to invite doubt. "This is what happens," she said, "when boundaries aren't respected." She spoke as if she were delivering a lesson, not an accusation. Her eyes moved around the room, gathering agreement without asking for it. Rachel nodded. "Honestly," she added, "this kind of attention-seeking always ends the same way." I noticed how easily the language shifted, no longer about a message. Now it was about character. That's the move systems like this make when facts don't cooperate. They stop arguing details and start redefining you. Victor exhaled slowly, as if disappointed. "I gave you a chance," he said. "A chance to do what? Lie convincingly? Submit convincingly? Collapse convincingly?" He reached for the belt again. This time, there was no hesitation. He didn't raise it. He didn't swing it. He just held it loosely in his hand, letting the implication do the work. He told me to kneel, to say it out loud, so everyone could hear. I looked around the room. Still no objections. Still no interruptions. Not even discomfort strong enough to break the silence. If you've never experienced collective quiet like that, it's difficult to describe. It's not neutral. It presses in on you. It tells you exactly where you stand. I realized something else then. They weren't trying to find the truth. They were testing a boundary. They wanted to see if I would accept public humiliation as a corrective measure, if I would allow my body, my posture, my voice to be used as proof of their authority. If I knelt, the system would have its confirmation, and systems remember what works. I didn't answer Victor. I didn't look at the belt. I looked at Eleanor. Her expression was composed, almost bored. This was procedural to her. A correction. An enforcement. She had no doubt about the outcome. That confidence clarified everything. I stopped speaking, not as a tactic, as a decision. Silence, when chosen deliberately, is not surrender. It's refusal. The room grew uncomfortable. Victor shifted his weight. "Say something," he demanded. I didn't. Rachel uncrossed and recrossed her arms. Someone near the back cleared their throat. A glass scraped softly against the table. Ordinary sounds filling the gap where my compliance was supposed to be. Victor's grip on the belt tightened, then loosened slightly. He didn't understand what was happening. The script had stopped working. Power hesitates when it senses uncertainty. I straightened my back. That small movement did more than any argument could have. It drew attention without asking for it. It signaled presence without aggression. Eleanor noticed. Her eyes narrowed just enough to show irritation. "Don't be dramatic," she said. That word dramatic was a familiar one. It was how accountability was dismissed, how discomfort was reframed as inconvenience. I met her gaze steadily. "This isn't drama," I said. "This is escalation." The room reacted to that word. Not emotionally, legally. Escalation suggests consequences. It suggests records. It suggests liability. Victor frowned. "You're blowing this out of proportion." I didn't argue. Instead, I asked a single question. Why does this need to happen in front of an audience? The room went still again. No one answered. Because everyone knew the answer. Public accusations are about power, not resolution. They're designed to corner, not clarify. Eleanor spoke quickly, trying to regain control. Families address issues together. I nodded slightly. Then families should also verify facts together. She didn't respond. That was the moment I felt the shift fully. Not triumph. Alignment. Everything inside me clicked into place. The years of silence, the careful accommodation, the constant calculations. They stopped feeling like strategy and started feeling like weight I didn't need to carry anymore. I wasn't angry. Anger would have tied me to the outcome. I was done negotiating. Victor took a step closer. "Kneel," he said again. His voice was lower now, less performative, more urgent. That urgency wasn't about morality. It was about control slipping. I looked at him directly. No. One word. Clear. Final. No explanation attached. The effect was immediate. Eleanor's composure cracked just slightly. "You're being disrespectful," I responded evenly. "I'm being precise." Rachel laughed softly, a short sound meant to belittle. "You think you're in a position to make demands?" "I'm not making demands," I said. "I'm setting boundaries." That confused them. Boundaries weren't something I had used before. Victor opened his mouth, then closed it. He looked around, searching for reinforcement, for someone to step in and restore order. No one did, because order depends on participation. And I had withdrawn mine. I took a step back, creating physical distance, not retreating, repositioning. "I'm not continuing this conversation under threat," I said. "You can put the belt down." He didn't move. I didn't wait. I turned and walked past him. Close enough that he could have stopped me. He didn't. That told me everything I needed to know about how much of his authority depended on my consent. As I moved toward the television, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Stability. Not because the situation was resolved, but because I had stopped compromising myself to preserve it. Behind me, Eleanor's voice followed, sharper now. "Where do you think you're going?" I didn't answer. I didn't owe her one. The remote sat on the side table, exactly where it always did. I picked it up and held it loosely in my hand. My pulse was steady. My breathing was even. I wasn't reacting. I was acting. Whatever happened next, it would not be shaped by fear or apology. It would be shaped by facts, and that was already a better position than I had ever held in that room. There's a difference between defiance and refusal. Defiance is loud. It wants a reaction. It feeds on opposition. Refusal is quiet. It doesn't argue. It simply withdraws consent. What happened next was refusal. I stood there for a moment longer, the remote cool in my hand, the television screen still dark. Behind me, the room waited. That waiting had weight to it. They were used to me filling silence with explanations, with reassurance, with something that made things easier for everyone else. I didn't. Victor was still holding the belt. He hadn't raised it. He hadn't put it down. He was suspended between two versions of the night, one where I complied, and one he hadn't prepared for. Eleanor broke the silence first. She always did when control felt threatened. "You're embarrassing yourself," she said. I turned slightly, just enough to face her. Not confrontational, measured. "No," I replied. "I'm opting out." That confused her. People like Eleanor understand confrontation. They understand obedience. They don't understand disengagement. "This family doesn't work like that," she said. I nodded once. I know. That was the truth. I had learned exactly how it worked. Victor stepped forward again. His voice dropped. "Don't do this," he said. "Just don't." That was the first time that night he sounded uncertain. I looked at him carefully. Really looked. 5 years of avoidance showed clearly now. The way he stood slightly angled, as if always prepared to step aside rather than step in. The way he waited for someone else, usually his mother, to finish the sentence for him. "This is already done," I said. "You just haven't caught up yet," he frowned. "What does that mean?" "It means," I said evenly, "that I'm not kneeling. Not now. Not ever." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't emphasize the words. I let them land on their own. The room reacted in small ways. A chair shifted. Someone adjusted their posture. Rachel's smile disappeared. Not dramatically, just enough to reveal irritation underneath. "You're acting like a victim," she said. I turned my head toward her. "I'm acting like a person who won't participate in her own humiliation," Rachel scoffed. "You're not in a position to dictate terms." "I'm not dictating," I replied. "I'm declining." That distinction mattered. Victor exhaled sharply. "This is getting out of hand." I nodded again. "It already did. When you decided this needed an audience." Eleanor stepped forward, closing the distance deliberately. She wanted proximity. She wanted pressure. "You're going to regret this," she said quietly. That was a threat dressed as concern. I met her eyes without blinking. "I regret not doing it sooner." For the first time, she didn't respond immediately. Silence settled again, thicker now, less certain. The kind that signals a system recalibrating. I took another step toward the television. Victor moved instinctively, as if to block me, then stopped himself. He hesitated. That hesitation was small, but it was enough. Authority falters when it has to think. "What are you planning to do?" Eleanor asked. I didn't answer. I pressed the power button. The screen lit up, bright and blue, the default input menu glowing against the dimmer room. The light changed the atmosphere immediately. It reflected off faces that had been so confident minutes earlier. Outside, fireworks echoed faintly. Midnight had passed. A new year had already begun without anyone noticing. Victor spoke again, softer now. "Turn that off." I looked at him. "No." Just like before. One word. No explanation attached. He swallowed. "You're making this worse." I tilted my head slightly. "For who?" That question didn't get an answer either. Eleanor straightened her jacket, a habitual move when she felt control slipping. "Whatever this is," she said, "it can wait. It's waited long enough," I replied. I reached into my pocket and took out the flash drive. Small, black, unremarkable. The kind of object that means nothing until it changes everything. Eleanor frowned. "What is that?" "Documentation," I said. One word. Accurate. Intentional. Victor's posture shifted immediately, his shoulders tightened. His gaze sharpened not with anger, but with calculation. "What documentation?" he asked. I didn't look at him as I plugged the flash drive into the side of the television. The screen flickered briefly, then recognized the device. "You should stop," he said. I finally turned to face him fully. "You should talk to a lawyer before telling me what to do." The room reacted to that. Not emotionally. Procedurally. Someone inhaled sharply. Someone else looked away. The word lawyer has a way of stripping drama out of a situation and replacing it with risk assessment. "This is a private home," Eleanor said quickly. "You have no right. It's a recorded household security system," I said calmly. "There's no expectation of privacy in common areas. You know that." I explained it when I set it up. Her mouth tightened. She did know. Months earlier, after a string of break-ins in the neighborhood, Eleanor had asked me to help install the security system. I handled the setup, the network connection, the cloud backup. I was the one who explained how long footage was stored, how access worked, and how archived files could be retrieved. Later, when something valuable went missing, she asked me to review the footage. Quietly, discreetly. She didn't want to involve the police unless she had to. I reviewed everything, and I didn't forget what I saw. "You had no right to go through those recordings," Eleanor said, her voice tight now. "I was instructed to," I replied. "Multiple times. I still have the messages if you'd like to review them." That was another shift. Instructions imply consent. Consent implies liability. Victor looked between us, trying to regain footing. "You're twisting things." I met his gaze. "I'm preserving them." I navigated through the folder structure with the remote. Dates, times, camera angles. The interface was familiar. I'd used it often. My hands didn't shake. Not because I was fearless, because I had already accepted the outcome. I scrolled to a specific date and paused. For just a moment, I considered whether I needed to say anything else. Whether I should explain how we got here. Whether I owed the room context. I didn't. Context had never protected me before. I looked around the room one last time before pressing play. Faces that had been certain were now wary. The silence felt different. No longer expectant. Unstable. This is the point, I said evenly, where the story stops being about a text message. I pressed play. The video loaded. And whatever version of control they thought they had left ended right there. The video didn't start with anything dramatic. No sudden movement, no sound. Just the living room, empty and familiar. The same couch Eleanor was sitting on now. The same hallway Rachel had walked through earlier that evening. The camera angle was wide and steady, fixed exactly where I had installed it. The timestamp appeared in the corner of the screen. 3 months earlier, late afternoon, a weekday. No one spoke. I let the footage run without commentary. Silence, when paired with evidence, does more work than explanation ever could. The front door opened. Eleanor walked in first. She moved the way she always did, unhurried, assured, like the space already belonged to her. She set her purse down on the table and glanced toward the hallway. Then Caleb stepped inside. Rachel's husband, the same man who had been sitting a few chairs away from her less than an hour earlier, the same man who had nodded along while my character was discussed like a flaw to be corrected. Someone in the room inhaled sharply. I didn't turn to see who. The footage continued. No cuts, no edits. One continuous angle. Caleb closed the door behind them. The body language was immediate, familiar, unnecessary to narrate. This wasn't business. This wasn't confusion. This wasn't a misunderstanding. Eleanor said something to him. The audio was faint, not enough to catch words, but tone carries when content doesn't. Her posture shifted. Relaxed. Unguarded. A version of her I had never seen in public. Caleb stepped closer. Too close. Rachel made a sound then. Not a scream. Something thinner. Like the air leaving a tire. Victor took a step back, as if distance could change what he was seeing. I stayed where I was. On the screen, Eleanor smiled. Not the controlled, social smile she used at gatherings. Something softer, assumed, private. Caleb reached for her arm. She didn't pull away. He kissed her. Briefly. Clearly. Without hesitation. The room fractured. A chair scraped against the floor. Someone said Eleanor's name sharply. Rachel stood up so fast she knocked into the table behind her. Her face had gone completely still, like her body hadn't caught up with what her eyes already knew. Eleanor spoke immediately, loud, automatic. This is taken out of context. I didn't look at her. There is no context, I said calmly. That changes what's on that screen. Caleb started talking at the same time she did. Explanations collided. Words like mistake, like stress, like family, like moment. I raised my hand. Not high, just enough. They stopped. That was new. I picked up the remote again and fast-forwarded. Dates changed. Timestamps jumped. Different days, same pattern. Different camera angles. The back hallway. The side entrance. The room Eleanor used when Rachel wasn't home. This wasn't an affair. It was a routine. Rachel's voice finally came, flat and quiet. How long? Caleb said her name. Eleanor reached toward her. Rachel stepped back. No. Victor turned to me, searching my face not for guilt, but for leverage. You knew. I verified. I said. There's a difference. Eleanor's composure cracked. You planned this. I documented it. After being asked to, Caleb moved toward the television. Turn it off. You don't have the right to show this. It already destroyed lives, I said evenly. You just didn't think it would be yours. The room didn't explode. It recalibrated. Facts don't bend, and once they enter a room, power shifts quietly. I set the remote down. We're done discussing my character. If there are questions, they can go to attorneys. Eleanor tried to recover. We can handle this privately. You forfeited privacy, I said, when you turned this into a public trial. I unlocked my phone transaction logs, access records, dates aligned with footage. Everything was obtained lawfully. There's a full archive, backed up off-site. Victor sat heavily. Rachel said nothing. Her silence weighed more than accusation. Then I said it. I'm filing for divorce. No announcement. Just fact. Eleanor called it impulsive. Overdue, I replied. Victor asked for privacy. 5 years of private conversations didn't change anything, I said. Tonight is when the truth entered the room. You're tearing the family apart, Eleanor said. No, I'm refusing to hold it together alone. Rachel finally stood. I need you to leave, she told Eleanor and Caleb. They did. I clarified the next steps counsel retained, accounts frozen, passwords changed, assets reviewed. No threats, just process. I'll be leaving tonight, I said. You didn't have to humiliate us, Victor said. I refused to be humiliated. I packed only what I needed and left without permission. Outside, the air was cold and clean. By the time the street disappeared behind me, I knew the night hadn't broken me. It clarified me. The days after were quiet, intentional. I moved into a temporary place arranged weeks earlier. Neutral, mine. I stabilized instead of rebuilding. The next morning, I met my attorney. No surprises, notice filed, accounts separated, credit secured, boundaries enforced procedurally, not emotionally. Victor tried to call. I answered once, in writing. All communication through counsel. He stopped. Rachel filed for separation within a month. When she called me, she said only, I believe you. That was enough. Caleb's consequences came quietly. Audit, suspension, removal. No scandal, just absence. Eleanor's power eroded more slowly. Invitations stopped, influence weakened. Isolation did what confrontation never could. I slept through the night. Work steadied. Decisions came faster once my energy stopped being divided. Months later, I ran into Victor by chance. He apologized carefully. I acknowledged it and walked away. Closure wasn't an event. It was a state. I hadn't lost a family. I exited a system that required my silence to function. The legal process ended quietly. Signatures. Confirmations. I marked the date privately and moved on. The temporary place became permanent. Fewer objects. Clear surfaces. Stability as function, not aesthetic. People adjusted, some faded, others stepped closer. I chose who could meet me without expectations. When asked how I was doing, I said, better, calm, clear, unburdened. One morning, I realized I hadn't thought about them in weeks. That's how you know something is over, not when it stops hurting, but when it stops requiring attention. I didn't reinvent myself. I lived without permission. Decisions became efficient. Boundaries assumed. Power stopped performing and started holding. Nothing about my life looked dramatic. It was consistent, and it held. If this story stayed with you, you're welcome to share your thoughts in the comments, and let me know where you're listening from. Stories told with clarity, boundaries, and real consequences live here. Your support, whether it's a comment, a super thanks, or simply being here, keeps these stories coming. On your screen, you'll see 2 more life stories I chose carefully for you. Same truth, same quiet power. This is Seraphine Stories. I'll see you in the next chapter.